The thunder crashed as Kathleen Porter stumbled along the muddy road, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other desperately trying to shield her face from the relentless downpour. She had been walking for hours. Maybe days' time had lost all meaning since she'd fled. Her sodden dress clung to her trembling frame as another contraction seized her, stronger than the last. Wyoming Territory, 1874. The western frontier was no place for a woman alone, especially not one 7 months with child and running from ghosts of her past. Kathleen's knees buckled beneath her as lightning split the sky. The world tilted sideways as she collapsed into the mud, the rain washing away her tears of pain and desperation. This was it, she thought. This was how it would end alone on a desolate road in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but the howling wind to hear her final prayers. Then, through the curtain of rain, came the sound of hoofbeats. A horse whinnied, and a shadow fell across her face. Through blurred vision, she made out the silhouette of a man dismounting, the brim of his hat shedding water as he knelt beside her. "Madam, can you hear me?" His voice was deep, tinged with concern. Kathleen tried to speak, but another contraction stole her breath. She clutched at her belly, a whimper escaping her lips. Strong hands carefully turned her over. She found herself looking up into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a weather-beaten face that somehow radiated both strength and gentleness. "You're with child," he said, his expression grave as he assessed her condition. He slipped off his duster and draped it over her. "Don't worry, you're safe now." Those words, so simple yet so powerful, broke something inside Kathleen. A sob tore from her throat as the stranger gathered her into his arms. "Name's Thomas Xavier," he said, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. "Everyone calls me Tex. I've got a ranch about a mile from here. Think you can hold on that long?" Kathleen managed a weak nod before another contraction gripped her. The pain was getting worse, coming faster. The baby wasn't due for weeks yet, but the stress of her journey and the harsh conditions had taken their toll. Tex settled her carefully on his horse before mounting behind her, one arm securely around her waist while the other held the reins. "Hang on, madam. Buttercup here knows the way home, even in this devil of a storm." The horse seemed to understand the urgency, picking its way carefully but quickly along the muddy trail. Kathleen leaned back against the solid warmth of the cowboy's chest, allowing herself, for the first time in months, to believe she might survive. "What's your name?" Tex asked, his breath warm against her ear as they rode. "Kathleen," she whispered. "Kathleen Porter." "Well, Miss Porter, you picked one hell of a day for a stroll." Despite the gravity of the situation, there was a hint of humor in his voice that made her want to smile. "Mrs.," she corrected weakly. "Though I suspect I'm a widow now." She felt him stiffen slightly behind her, but he didn't press for details. Instead, he said, "There's the ranch up ahead. We'll get you dry and warm in no time." Through the rain, Kathleen could make out the dark shape of a modest but well-maintained ranch house. Light glowed warmly from the windows, a beacon of hope in the storm-ravaged landscape. As they approached, the front door flew open, and an older woman rushed out, a shawl clutched over her head. "Thomas Xavier, what in heaven's name are you doing out in this weather?" The woman's scolding died on her lips as she noticed Kathleen. "Lord above, bring her in quickly." Within minutes, Kathleen found herself inside a cozy kitchen, her sodden clothes being replaced with a warm nightgown, while the older woman, who introduced herself as Martha, Tex's housekeeper, clucked and fussed around her. "The poor dear is with child and half frozen to boot," Martha muttered, helping Kathleen into a bed in a small but neat room off the kitchen. What kind of monster would let a woman in her condition wander about in such weather? "That's what I aim to find out," Tex said from the doorway, his expression grim. "But first, we need to get her stable. I've sent for Doc Williams, but in this storm it might be a while before he can get here." Another contraction, sharper than before, tore through Kathleen. She cried out, clutching at her belly. "I fear the baby might not wait for the doctor," Martha said, rolling up her sleeves. "I've helped bring many a child into this world. If you can fetch me some clean towels and hot water, we'll do what needs to be done." Tex nodded and disappeared. Martha turned to Kathleen with a reassuring smile. "Now, dear, let's see what's happening with that little one." The hours that followed were a blur of pain for Kathleen. The contractions came harder and faster, even as Martha assured her that everything was progressing as it should. Tex remained nearby, fetching whatever Martha needed and occasionally offering Kathleen words of encouragement when he entered the room. Just after midnight, as the storm finally began to abate, Kathleen's daughter was born small but with a healthy set of lungs that announced her arrival to the world. "She's beautiful," Martha said, placing the swaddled infant in Kathleen's arms after cleaning and checking her. A bit early, perhaps, but strong. Kathleen gazed down at her daughter's tiny face, overcome with a love so fierce it threatened to consume her. "Hello, my little one," she whispered. "We made it." Tex appeared in the doorway, his expression softening as he took in the scene. "Congratulations, Mrs. Porter. She's a fine-looking child." "Thank you," Kathleen said, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. "For everything, if you hadn't come along when you did." He waved away her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Kathleen said firmly. "Not everyone would have." The next few days passed in a haze of exhaustion and wonder for Kathleen. She named her daughter Hope, a testament to what had been restored to her on that stormy night. Martha doted on both mother and child, ensuring Kathleen ate well and rested as much as possible. Tex kept a respectful distance but checked in regularly. Kathleen learned that he ran the modest ranch with just Martha and a young ranch hand named Billy. His parents had passed years ago, leaving him the property. He wasn't wealthy by any means, but he worked hard and had earned the respect of everyone in the nearby town of Wickenburg. On the fourth day, as Kathleen sat in a rocking chair by the window, nursing Hope while gazing out at the Wyoming landscape now bathed in sunshine, Tex knocked softly on the open door. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. "Of course not," Kathleen replied. "It's your house, after all." He entered somewhat awkwardly, taking off his hat and turning it in his hands. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you. Your kindness has been overwhelming." Tex nodded, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Mrs. Porter, I don't mean to pry, but I can't help but wonder what brought you out to these parts, especially in your condition and during such weather." Kathleen's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted Hope's blanket. She had known this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier. "I was running," she admitted softly. "My husband, Frank, was a gambler, a bad one. We lived in Denver, where he accumulated debts to some very dangerous men." She swallowed hard. 2 months ago, he disappeared, left a note saying he was sorry, but he couldn't pay what he owed. 3 weeks later, those men came looking for him and decided I would do instead. Tex's jaw tightened. "They threatened you while you were carrying a child. They said I could work off Frank's debt in their establishment." The implication hung heavy in the air. I refused, of course. "That night they set fire to our home. I barely escaped with what I could carry." Kathleen looked down at Hope's peaceful face. "I've been traveling west ever since, taking odd jobs where I could, staying ahead of them. I had family once in California, I thought perhaps." "And the father of your child, this Frank?" Tex asked carefully. "Dead, most likely," Kathleen replied, surprising herself with how little emotion the statement evoked. "He wasn't a bad man, just weak. Gambling was a sickness for him, but he abandoned us when we needed him most." Tex was quiet for a long moment, then said, "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need, Mrs. Porter. You and your daughter both." "I couldn't impose. It's no imposition," he interrupted. "Martha loves having you here. She's been singing around the house more in these past few days than I've heard in years. And there's plenty of space." Kathleen's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Tex shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "My mother always said that kindness costs nothing but means everything." He replaced his hat on his head. "Rest now. We can talk more when you're stronger." As he left, Kathleen gazed down at Hope, who had fallen asleep at her breast. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had found a safe harbor. The weeks that followed settled into a surprisingly comfortable routine. As Kathleen regained her strength, she insisted on helping with household chores. Martha initially protested, but eventually relented when she saw how important it was to Kathleen to contribute. Tex was often busy with ranch work, but he made time each evening to sit with Kathleen on the porch after supper, watching the sunset while Hope slept nearby in a cradle he had fashioned himself. "Did you make this?" Kathleen had asked the first time she'd seen it, running her fingers over the smooth wood and intricate carvings of stars and moons along the sides. "It was supposed to be for my sister," Tex had admitted quietly. "She was expecting her first child 5 years ago. Neither she nor the baby survived the birth." His face had clouded with old grief. "The cradle's been in the attic ever since." "I'm so sorry," Kathleen had whispered, understanding now why he'd been so determined to help her that night in the rain. As spring bloomed across the Wyoming territory, Kathleen found herself falling into a rhythm with life at the Xavier Ranch. She took over much of the cooking, discovering that Tex had a particular fondness for her apple pies. She learned to garden from Martha, who seemed pleased to have a pupil after years of tending the vegetables alone. Hope thrived, growing plumper and more alert with each passing day. Tex, initially awkward around the infant, gradually became more comfortable, even offering to hold her occasionally while Kathleen attended to other tasks. It was during one such moment, as Kathleen returned from hanging laundry to find Tex gently rocking Hope while humming a tune, that she realized her feelings for this quiet, steadfast man had deepened beyond mere gratitude. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. She was technically still married, though she hadn't heard from Frank in months. And while Tex had been nothing but kind, he had never indicated any romantic interest in her. One evening in late April, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Hope asleep in her cradle between them, Tex cleared his throat. "I've been thinking, Mrs. Porter, please," she interrupted gently. "After all this time, surely you can call me Kathleen." A small smile tugged at his lips. "Kathleen, then. I've been thinking that you might want to consider making your stay here more permanent." Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "You've mentioned your concerns about those men from Denver finding you," he said carefully. "It seems to me that you might be safer if you had a more official reason for being here." Kathleen's breath caught. "Are you suggesting a marriage of convenience?" Tex clarified quickly, his ears reddening slightly. "It would give you and Hope legal protection. My name, my home. No one would question your presence here then." "Oh." Kathleen tried to hide her disappointment. Of course he wasn't proposing out of affection. It was merely another act of kindness, a practical solution to her predicament. "You don't have to answer right away," Tex added, misinterpreting her silence. "It's just something to consider." "It's very generous of you," she managed to say. "But wouldn't you rather wait for someone you could truly love?" Tex looked at her then, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. I lost someone once before the war. Since then, I haven't much thought about love or marriage, but I respect you, Kathleen. I admire your strength and your devotion to your daughter. I think we could build a good life together, even if it starts as an arrangement of necessity. Kathleen nodded slowly, her emotions in turmoil. May I have some time to think about it? Of course. He stood, stretching slightly. I'll bid you good night. After he left, Kathleen remained on the porch, gazing at the stars while absently rocking Hope's cradle with one foot. A marriage of convenience. It was more than she had any right to expect, a solution to her most pressing problems. So why did the idea fill her with such a complex mix of gratitude and melancholy? The next morning, Tex rode into Wickenburg for supplies, leaving Kathleen to her thoughts. She was kneading bread dough, flour up to her elbows when Martha bustled in from the garden. "That boy," Martha said, shaking her head as she deposited a basket of early vegetables on the table. Always was hopeless with words. Kathleen looked up, confused. "I'm sorry." Martha fixed her with a knowing look. "Thomas. I overheard his clumsy proposal last night. These old ears still work just fine. He didn't say half of what he should have." "What do you mean?" Martha sat down, gesturing for Kathleen to join her. "I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, watched him grow into the man he is today, and in all my years, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you when you're not watching." Kathleen's heart fluttered. "Surely you're mistaken." "Child, at my age, there's precious little I'm mistaken about," Martha said dryly. "Thomas Xavier isn't offering you marriage out of pity or mere practicality. That man is head over heels in love with you, but too stubborn and scared to say it outright." "But why would he be scared?" Kathleen asked, trying to absorb this revelation. "Because he lost Elizabeth before the war, like he told you. What he didn't say was that he blamed himself. She took fever and he was away when it happened. By the time he got back, it was too late." Martha patted Kathleen's hand. "He's afraid of loving and losing again, so he hides behind practicality and duty." "I had no idea," Kathleen whispered. "Well, now you do," Martha said briskly, standing up. "What you do with that information is entirely up to you, my dear." For the rest of the day, Kathleen's mind whirled with this new perspective. By the time she heard Tex's horse approaching in the late afternoon, she had made her decision. She met him in the yard, Hope cradled in her arms. The sight of him, dusty from the trail but his face lighting up at the sight of them, confirmed everything Martha had said. "Welcome back," she called as he dismounted. "Did you get everything you needed in town?" "Most of it," he replied, leading his horse toward the barn. The mercantile was out of coffee, if you can believe it. Said a new shipment should arrive next week. Kathleen followed him into the barn, watching as he unsaddled the horse. "Tex, about what you asked last night." His movements slowed, but he didn't turn to face her. "Like I said, you don't need to decide right away. I've given it a lot of thought," she continued, "and I have an answer for you, but first I need to ask you something." He finally turned, his expression guarded. "What's that?" "If we were to marry," Kathleen said carefully, "would it truly be just for convenience? Or might there be another reason you're not telling me?" Color rose in his cheeks, but he held her gaze steadily. "What other reason would there be?" "Perhaps," she said, taking a step closer, "the same reason that I'm going to say yes." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by something that looked remarkably like hope. "And what reason is that?" he asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. "Because somewhere between that stormy night and now, I've fallen in love with you, Thomas Xavier," Kathleen said simply. "And if Martha is to be believed, you might feel the same way about me." For a moment he stood frozen, then a slow smile spread across his face. "Martha's got a big mouth," he said, closing the distance between them. "But she's rarely wrong." Gently, mindful of Hope nestled between them, he cupped Kathleen's face in his calloused hands. "Yes, Kathleen Porter, I love you. Have for weeks now. I just didn't think I had any right to say it, given your circumstances." "My circumstances are that I'm a woman who was fortunate enough to collapse in the rain near the ranch of the most honorable man I've ever met," she replied, smiling through sudden tears. "And yes, I will marry you. Not for convenience, but because I want to build a life with you." His kiss was gentle, almost reverent, but it contained a promise of deeper passion to come. When they parted, Hope made a small sound, drawing their attention downward. "What do you think, little one?" Tex asked, gently stroking the baby's cheek with one finger. "Would you mind having me as a father?" Hope grasped his finger with surprising strength, bringing a laugh from both adults. "I'll take that as approval," Tex said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. 2 weeks later, on a perfect May morning, Kathleen Porter became Kathleen Xavier in a simple ceremony at Wickenburg's small church. Hope, dressed in a christening gown that Martha had painstakingly sewn, was baptized the same day. The town turned out in force, curious to meet the woman who had finally captured the heart of the bachelor rancher. Kathleen, who had feared judgment for her situation, was instead welcomed warmly into the community. After the ceremony, a celebration was held at the ranch, with neighbors bringing dishes and good wishes. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Tex found Kathleen sitting on the porch steps, watching the festivities with Hope asleep in her arms. "Happy, Mrs. Xavier?" he asked, settling beside her. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "Though I keep expecting to wake up and find it was all a dream." He took her free hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "No dream, just a new beginning." As if to prove his point, Hope stirred and opened her eyes, regarding them both with a solemn expression before breaking into a toothless smile. "See," Tex said. "Hope agrees." Later that night, after the guests had departed, and Hope was settled in her cradle in the nursery that had once been Tex's childhood room, husband and wife came together for the first time. Their lovemaking was tender yet passionate, a physical expression of the love that had grown between them through circumstances neither could have predicted. As they lay entwined afterward, Kathleen's head on Tex's chest, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From desperate flight to profound love, all in the span of a few short months. "What are you thinking?" Tex asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That sometimes blessings come disguised as disasters," she replied. "If I hadn't been in such dire straits that night, if you hadn't happened along when you did, I'd still be a lonely bachelor, and Martha would still be complaining about it," Tex finished with a chuckle. Then, more seriously, "I believe some things are meant to be, Kathleen. Call it fate or providence or whatever you like, but I think you and Hope were always meant to find your way here." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him, this man who had saved her in more ways than one. "I think you might be right." The summer passed in a haze of happiness for the newly formed family. Tex taught Kathleen to ride, laughing at her initial nervousness but never rushing her. By August, she could confidently handle a gentle mare he'd selected especially for her, and they often rode together in the cool of the evening, Hope securely bundled in a sling Kathleen wore. The ranch prospered under their combined care. Kathleen proved to have a natural affinity for chickens, and soon expanded their modest flock, selling eggs in town for extra income. She also planted a larger garden than Martha had ever managed alone, preserving the bounty for winter. Tex, for his part, seemed invigorated by his new role as husband and father. He tackled long postponed improvements to the ranch, building an addition to the house and repairing fences that had been mended only haphazardly in recent years. Hope grew and thrived, learning to roll over and sit up, her personality emerging as bright and determined. She had Kathleen's dark hair, but curiously, eyes as blue as Tex's, a coincidence that delighted him. "She's got your stubbornness, too," Kathleen teased one evening as Tex tried unsuccessfully to get Hope to eat a spoonful of mashed carrots she had decided she didn't want. "My stubbornness," he countered with raised eyebrows. "Have you met yourself, Mrs. Xavier?" Their playful bickering was interrupted by a knock at the door, an unusual occurrence in the evening. Tex handed Hope back to Kathleen and went to answer it, one hand instinctively checking the pistol he kept at his belt. Kathleen heard muffled voices, then Tex returned to the kitchen with the town's sheriff following behind him. The lawman removed his hat, nodding respectfully to Kathleen. "Evening, madam. Sorry to intrude on your family time." "Not at all, Sheriff Johnson," Kathleen replied, though anxiety curled in her stomach. "Is everything all right?" The sheriff exchanged a glance with Tex. "Well, that's what I came to discuss. Got a telegram today from the authorities in Denver. They've been investigating a gambling ring that's been causing trouble throughout Colorado. Seems they've rounded up most of the members, including some men who were reportedly looking for a woman named Kathleen Porter." Kathleen's arms tightened around Hope. "They found me." "No, madam," the sheriff assured her quickly. "They haven't got any idea where you are, but they did find something else." He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. "A body about 6 months back, identified recently as one Frank Porter." Though she had suspected as much, confirmation of Frank's death hit Kathleen harder than expected. "How did he die?" she asked softly. "Gunshot wound. They found him in an alley behind a gambling hall." The sheriff cleared his throat uncomfortably. "There's more, madam. He had a significant amount of money on him when he died. The authorities believe he won big that night and was killed for his winnings. They've recovered what they could, and since you're his widow, it rightfully belongs to you." He handed her the paper, which turned out to be a bank draft for a considerable sum. "Denver authorities asked us to keep an eye out for you, said you might be traveling west," the sheriff continued. "I put 2 and 2 together when I remembered Tex here bringing home a bride with a similar story." Tex moved to stand beside Kathleen, a supportive hand on her shoulder. "Is there anything else we should know, Sheriff? Just that those men won't be troubling anyone for a long while. Most got sentenced to 10 years or more." The sheriff replaced his hat. "Thought you'd want to know, madam. Might help you sleep easier." After the sheriff left, Kathleen sat quietly at the kitchen table, the bank draft in front of her, Hope playing contentedly in her lap. Tex prepared a pot of coffee, giving her space to process the news. "He's really gone," she finally said. "I suspected as much, but having it confirmed." Tex sat across from her, covering her hand with his. "I'm sorry, Kathleen. Whatever his faults, he was your husband once." "Yes." She looked up, meeting his concerned gaze. "But the strangest thing is, I don't feel grief so much as relief." "Is that terrible of me?" "No," he said firmly. "It's human. He put you through hell, whether he meant to or not. It's natural to feel relief knowing those men can't hurt you anymore." Kathleen nodded, glancing down at the bank draft. "What should I do with this?" "That's entirely up to you," Tex replied. "It's your money, ours," she corrected. "We're a family now." A slow smile spread across his face. "Yes, we are, but I mean it. Whatever you decide is fine by me." Kathleen considered for a moment. "I'd like to set most of it aside for Hope's future. But perhaps we could use some to expand the ranch. You've mentioned wanting more cattle. Are you sure?" Tex asked. "That money could buy you a fresh start somewhere else if you wanted." "Why would I want to be anywhere else?" Kathleen asked, genuinely puzzled. Everything I love is right here. The tenderness in Tex's eyes made her breath catch. Even after months of marriage, moments like this still had the power to overwhelm her. I thank God every day for sending you to me, Kathleen Xavier, he said softly. Even if it took a rainstorm and a collapsed pregnant woman to do it. She laughed, the lingering sadness dispelled by his words. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds like quite the romantic beginning. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Kathleen felt a profound sense of closure. Frank was gone, his debts settled, the men who had threatened her imprisoned. The past no longer had power over her. I want you to know, she whispered to Tex, that while I'm sorry for how Frank died, I don't regret where my life has led. If things had been different, I might never have found you. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. We found each other, Kathleen. That's what matters now. As fall painted the Wyoming landscape in brilliant hues of red and gold, Kathleen discovered she was expecting again. The news filled her with joy rather than the fear she'd experienced during her first pregnancy. Are you sure you're ready? Tex asked when she told him, concern evident in his expression. Hope's not even a year old yet. I know it will be challenging, Kathleen acknowledged, but I couldn't be happier. Hope will have a sibling close in age, they'll be companions for life. Tex's face broke into a grin as he lifted her off her feet in a careful embrace. Another child, he marveled. Our child. The emphasis on our wasn't lost on Kathleen. Though Tex had fully embraced his role as Hope's father, this baby would be connected to him by blood as well as love. I hope it's a boy, she said, smiling up at him. With your eyes and your kind heart. As long as he or she is healthy, I don't care one whit, Tex replied, though the idea of a son clearly pleased him. The news of Kathleen's pregnancy spread quickly through Wickenburg. The community that had embraced her now showered her with practical gifts and advice. Martha, who had initially planned to move to her sister's in Idaho after the wedding, postponed her departure indefinitely. You'll need an extra pair of hands with 2 little ones underfoot, she declared. Besides, Idaho can wait. My sister's not going anywhere. The winter of 1874-1875 was harsh, with blizzards that sometimes confined them to the ranch house for days at a time. But unlike the previous winter, which Kathleen had spent in fear and isolation, this one was filled with warmth and companionship. In the evenings, they gathered in the cozy parlor. Martha would knit by the fire while Kathleen read aloud from one of Tex's books. Hope, now crawling and increasingly vocal, would explore the room under their watchful eyes. Tex often whittled small toys for her blocks, animals, a tiny wagon with wheels that really turned. You're becoming quite the craftsman, Kathleen remarked one evening as Hope gleefully clutched a wooden horse he had just completed. My father taught me, Tex replied, carefully cleaning his knife before putting it away. Said a man should know how to make something with his hands that brings joy to others. He was a wise man, Kathleen said. I wish I could have met him. He would have liked you, Tex assured her. My mother, too. They valued honesty and hard work above all else. He glanced at her growing belly. They would have been thrilled about the grandchildren. On a clear, cold morning in February 1875, Kathleen went into labor. This time, there was no fear, no desperate struggle in the rain. She was surrounded by those who loved her Martha with her practical efficiency, and Tex, who refused to be banished to the barn as was customary for expectant fathers. I wasn't there for my sister when she needed me, he said firmly. I won't leave Kathleen now. Martha muttered about impropriety, but relented when she saw the determination in his eyes. He stayed by Kathleen's side throughout the labor, wiping her brow, holding her hand through contractions. murmuring encouragement when her strength flagged. Their son was born just after noon, a robust boy with a healthy cry and a shock of dark hair like his mother's. "He's perfect," Tex whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he held his son for the first time. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Samuel Thomas Xavier, after both their fathers. Hope, not quite understanding what the fuss was about, was nonetheless fascinated by the tiny new person who had joined their family. She would sit beside Kathleen while she nursed Samuel, solemnly patting his head and babbling what seemed like very serious baby conversation. "She's telling him all the important things he needs to know about being a Xavier," Tex joked, watching the siblings interact. "Like what?" Kathleen asked, amused. "Oh, where the best cookies are hidden, which floorboards creak, how to wrap Papa around your little finger." He winked at Hope, who beamed back at him. As spring returned to the land, bringing new growth and renewal, Kathleen marveled at how much her life had changed in the span of a year. From a desperate woman with nothing but her unborn child and the clothes on her back, she had become the heart of a thriving family, beloved wife, mother of 2 beautiful children. One evening in early May, on the anniversary of their wedding, Tex suggested they take a ride together, just the 2 of them. Martha was more than happy to watch the children for an hour. "Go on," she urged. "Young couples need time alone. These little ones will be fine with their old Aunt Martha." They rode to a ridge overlooking the ranch, where a single cottonwood tree provided shade. Tex had prepared a small picnic with wine, cheese, and the apple pie Kathleen had baked that morning. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Xavier," he said, helping her down from her horse. "1 year since you made me the happiest man in Wyoming territory." "Only Wyoming," she teased, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "Your ambitions are too modest, Mr. Xavier," he laughed, the sound carried away by the gentle breeze. "You're right. The happiest man in all the Western Territories, then." They sat beneath the tree, shoulders touching, looking out over the land that was their home. The ranch house lay nestled in the valley below, smoke curling from its chimney. Beyond it stretched the pastures where Tex's growing herd of cattle grazed. The barn and outbuildings, all showing signs of recent improvements, stood as testament to their shared labor. "It's beautiful," Kathleen said softly. "All of it." "Yes," Tex agreed, but he was looking at her rather than the view. "Most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she blushed, still not entirely accustomed to such direct compliments. "Flatterer." "Just honest," he corrected, reaching into his pocket. "I have something for you. It's not much, but—" He handed her a small wooden box, intricately carved with the same pattern of stars and moons that adorned Hope's cradle. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft fabric, lay a gold locket on a delicate chain. "Oh, Tex," Kathleen breathed, lifting it carefully. "It's lovely." "Open it," he urged. Inside were 2 tiny portraits, Hope on one side, Samuel on the other, expertly rendered in miniature. "How did you manage this?" she asked, astonished. "When did you have time?" "I rode into Cheyenne a couple of times while you thought I was checking fence lines," he admitted with a sheepish grin. "Found a portrait artist there who was willing to work from my descriptions and the sketches I did. Took them to a jeweler for the setting." Tears welled in Kathleen's eyes as she fastened the locket around her neck. "It's the most thoughtful gift I've ever received. Thank you." His smile faded slightly as he took her hand. "There's something else I need to say, Kathleen. Something I should have told you before now." Her heart skipped with sudden anxiety. "What is it? Before you came into my life, I was just existing, going through the motions day after day." His voice was low, earnest. "I told you about Elizabeth, but what I didn't say was that after losing her, I decided it was safer not to care too deeply about anyone. I built walls around my heart and convinced myself I was content with my solitary life." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Then you collapsed on my road in the middle of that storm, and those walls started crumbling from the first moment I held you in my arms. By the time Hope was born, I knew I was in trouble. By spring, I was completely in love with you both." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Kathleen asked softly. "Fear," he admitted. "Not just of rejection, but of what it meant to love again, to be vulnerable to that kind of loss." He met her gaze directly. "But I'm not afraid anymore, Kathleen. Whatever the future holds, I know now that loving you and our children is worth any risk." She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a tender kiss that quickly deepened with shared passion. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, she rested her forehead against his. "I have a confession too," she said. "When I married Frank, I thought I was in love, but now I understand that what I felt then was nothing compared to this." She placed her hand over his heart. "This is what love truly is, not just passion or convenience, but partnership, respect, trust, and a healthy dose of stubbornness on both sides," Tex added with a grin. "Especially that," she agreed, laughing. They stayed on the ridge until the sun began to set, talking of their hopes for the future. More children, perhaps, expansion of the ranch, maybe even a journey to California someday to find Kathleen's distant relatives. As they rode home in the gathering dusk, Kathleen felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, with this man, on this land, raising their children together. Martha met them at the door with Samuel in her arms and Hope clutching her skirts. "Just in time," she said. "This young man is getting mighty hungry, and his sister has been asking for her mama and papa." Hope lifted her arms to Tex, who swung her up onto his shoulders with practiced ease. "Were you good for Aunt Martha, little lady?" he asked, and she nodded solemnly, her small hands gripping his hair. Kathleen took Samuel, nuzzling his soft cheek before settling in the rocking chair to nurse him. The familiar routine of evening began: supper preparation, stories for Hope, bath time for both children. The ordinary moments that, strung together, created the extraordinary tapestry of their life together. Later, with both children asleep, Kathleen and Tex stood in the doorway of the nursery, arms around each other as they watched their son and daughter in peaceful slumber. "Did you ever imagine this?" Kathleen whispered. "A year ago, I mean." "Not in my wildest dreams," Tex replied honestly. "But now, I can't imagine anything else." As they walked hand in hand to their own bedroom, Kathleen thought of that desperate night in the rain, when all hope had seemed lost. How strange and wonderful that her lowest moment had led her here, to this man, this home, this life filled with love. "Don't worry, you're safe now," Tex had said to her that night. Words offered to a stranger in distress, never knowing they would be the beginning of a journey that would transform them both. And she was safe not just from external threats, but in the deeper sense of having found where she truly belonged. In Thomas Xavier's arms, in the home they had built together, in the family they had created, Kathleen had found not just safety but fulfillment, purpose, and a love more profound than she had ever dared to dream possible. As years passed, the Xavier ranch prospered and grew. Tex's careful management and Kathleen's shrewd business sense proved a powerful combination. They added more land, increased their cattle herd, and even ventured into horse breeding, with Tex developing a line of sturdy, intelligent mounts that became sought after throughout the territory. Hope and Samuel were joined by a sister, Elizabeth Martha, in 1877, and another brother, James Franklin, in 1880. The Xavier children grew up wild and free on the Wyoming range eland, learning to ride almost before they could walk. developing the self-reliance and strong work ethic their parents valued. Kathleen never forgot her humble beginnings or the desperate circumstances that had brought her to Wickenburg. Each year on the anniversary of that stormy night, she made a special donation to the local church's fund for women in need. "Paying forward the kindness that saved my life," she called it. Martha stayed with them until 1882, when she finally decided, at the age of 72, that it was time to join her sister in Idaho. The parting was tearful but sweetened by promises of visits and regular correspondence. "You'll always have a home here," Tex told her as he helped her onto the eastbound stagecoach. "This family wouldn't exist without you." "Nonsense," Martha replied, though her eyes glistened. "You two would have found your way to each other eventually. I just helped smooth the path a bit." In the summer of 1884, 10 years after Kathleen had collapsed in the rain, the Xaviers hosted a grand celebration at their ranch. The occasion was twofold: the 10th anniversary of Tex and Kathleen's marriage, and the dedication of the new schoolhouse in Wickenburg, built largely through their funding. The entire town turned out for the festivities. Tables groaned under the weight of food and drink. A band played while couples danced on a wooden platform Tex and his ranch hands had constructed for the occasion. Children raced about, playing games and consuming alarming quantities of cake and lemonade. Hope, now 10, and showing signs of her mother's beauty combined with her adoptive father's quiet strength, helped look after her younger siblings and their friends. Samuel, at 9, was already showing a talent for horsemanship that made Tex beam with pride. Elizabeth, 7, had inherited her mother's sharp mind and her father's blue eyes. Little James, just 4, toddled about, charming everyone with his infectious laugh. As the sun began to set, painting the Wyoming sky in spectacular hues of orange and purple, Tex found Kathleen sitting on the porch, watching the celebration with a contented smile. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Xavier?" he asked, offering his hand with an exaggerated bow. "Always, Mr. Xavier," she replied, allowing him to lead her to the dance platform. The band struck up a waltz, and they moved together with the easy grace of a couple long accustomed to each other's rhythms. Kathleen noted with amusement that despite a decade together, Tex's ears still reddened slightly when she pressed close to him. "Happy," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Completely," she assured him, her head resting on his shoulder as they swayed to the music. "Though I can hardly believe it's been 10 years. Best 10 years of my life," Tex said, "and that's just the beginning." As the music swelled around them, Kathleen thought back to the frightened, desperate woman she had been, stumbling through the rain with nothing but fear and a fragile hope for her unborn child's future. That woman could never have imagined the rich, full life that awaited her: the love of a good man, the joy of their children, the respect of a community, the satisfaction of building something lasting and meaningful together. "What are you thinking about?" Tex asked, noting her reflective expression. "About how endings can become beginnings," she replied. "How the darkest night can lead to the brightest dawn." He smiled down at her, the same smile that had first given her hope in the midst of despair. "Poetic tonight, aren't we?" "Must be the occasion," she said, returning his smile. "Or perhaps it's just gratitude. For you, for our family, for all of this." She gestured to encompass not just the celebration but their entire shared life. "I'm the grateful one," Tex insisted. "You gave me a reason to live again, Kathleen. You and hope." The music ended, but they remained on the dance floor, reluctant to break the moment. Around them, the community that had become their extended family continued the celebration: friends and neighbors who had witnessed their journey from that stormy night to this joyous evening. Later, After the guests had departed and the children were asleep, exhausted from the day's excitement, Tex and Kathleen stood on the porch of their home, the same porch where he had carried her that first night, though the house had been expanded and improved many times since. "It's been a good life, hasn't it?" Tex said, his arm around her waist as they gazed at the star-filled Wyoming sky. "The best," Kathleen agreed, leaning into his embrace. "And we're just getting started." "Just getting started," he echoed, turning to capture her lips in a kiss that held all the passion of their youth and the depth of understanding that comes only with time and shared experience. Above them, a shooting star traced a brilliant path across the heavens, a fitting symbol, Kathleen thought, of the journey that had brought her here. From darkness into light, from despair into joy, from a stranger collapsed in the rain to a woman surrounded by love and purpose. "Don't worry, you're safe now," Tex had promised her that night. A decade later, in the circle of his arms, with their children sleeping peacefully nearby and their future stretching bright before them, Kathleen knew he had kept that promise in ways neither of them could have imagined. And as they stood together beneath the vast Wyoming sky, she silently renewed her own promise to cherish every moment of this extraordinary life they had built together, this beautiful journey that had begun in the most unlikely way, with a cowboy's kindness to a pregnant stranger on a stormy night.